And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk. Nationwide Arena, Columbus, Ohio. First round of the East Region. Michigan State Spartans against USC Trojans. First game up on Friday. A lot of surprises around the NCAA Tournament today on Thursday. Today, Tom Izzo and players met with media, as did Andy Enfield and a couple of USC players. No bombshells today from the press conference as expected, but the tournament's underway. There's been a couple of upsets. Got the Michigan State game, big one tomorrow. Where do you want to start off, Paul? What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things to talk about. You know, a lot of talk about is that Michigan State hasn't gotten through a weekend in a while, but the fact that they've been here and that these guys have played some big games. I mean, I think back to that Davidson game last year. That was a big game and a tough game. And then Michigan State went back in the very next game and gave Duke all they could really handle, and that was Coach K's last game. That was in Duke territory down there, and I thought Michigan State acquitted itself well in that game. So, well, the narrative is that Michigan State hasn't advanced in a while, and I'd agree with that, except I'd say, like you were saying on the car ride down, who has? You know, when you look at in the grand scheme of things, I think Michigan State has got
that still exist, and they're still USC is one of them, by the way. But you know, Michigan State last year against Duke, they didn't make it to the Sweet 16. But show me some teams that did that to Duke.
Right.
I don't care what round it is. You know, to act like that's not a big accomplishment. You know, it's pretty solid showing last year. They want to go further this year, but we've seen years when Michigan State has gone to the Sweet 16 and not put forth an effort like that.
Yeah, and I would say this about this Michigan State team. They've battled all season long, and you might not like necessarily all the outcomes. They lost some games that they'd like to have back, but these guys have scrapped, and they've been in so many of these close games, and they have veteran players that have done that before. So it comes down, in my opinion, to our guys going to play the games that they need to play. And for me, it starts with the point guard position. USC's got really good length on defense. They're a team that takes pride in defense. They're holding teams under 40% shooting, and when that happens, your point guard has to be the facilitator. He has to set your other players up. And USC today during the press conference, Andy Enfield was talking about the need to shut down or to slow down Tyson Walker. He called Tyson Walker an elite scorer. So other guys are going to have to get some shots off, and Tyson Walker is going to have to score tough shots, but to get the kind of looks that Michigan State needs to get, they're going to have A.J. Hoggard play well in not just in transition, but in the half court as well, and make good decisions. That's where it starts.
And you do well against USC if you shoot 45%. Now, Arizona was able to shoot 51, 52 a couple times. I wrote this in the article this morning. USC held UCLA to like 36% a couple times in those two games. The defense is for real. They got a shot blocker that's looking to alter shots at all times, and he's very happy when he can leave his man to go do it. He'll be leaving Sissoko, especially with the way Michigan State has Sissoko at the top of the key a lot with handoffs and screens. He'll leave him up there and stay back and be a goalie, and that has an impact on USC's outstanding 2-point field goal percentage defense. I've been talking about it all week and writing about it, that USC, one of the things they do real well is they switch at four positions. They've got a lot of defensive versatility. The size and athleticism allows them to do that. Peterson guarded, at 6'9", Drew Peterson guarded Tiger Campbell. They're not afraid to put him on a point guard. So, you know, they'll switch him on to Tyson Walker, and they'll do it for possession. That keeps you airtight when you're able to switch with four, and then, you know, sometimes they'll double team the ball and rotate behind it, which is a little bit helter-skelter, a little bit erratic, but they're comfortable doing it, and they scramble and get out and cover. Arizona, they would get the scramble and cover, shot fake, and make the extra pass for three-pointers, like Michigan State did against Nebraska. Now, that was Nebraska. Nebraska is not as good a defensive team as USC is, but Michigan State has the capacity with four shooters to maybe be able to create some shots and some openings against a defense that is giving so many teams problems. And it's 10 versus 7. USC's a 10, but to me this is a 50-50 coin flip game. I think it's going to be a dogfight. If Michigan State wins, they'll deserve some credit.
Yeah, I mean, I think to be honest with you, most 10-7 games are that. Even 11-6 games. I mean, and you look throughout the tournament, you know, 12-5 are getting that way. Obviously, there's lots of upsets, but Michigan State has to play a complete game in in this one, and it starts with defense and rebounding. I don't think they can go in there and expect to. They can't go in here and expect to to shoot 50% and win this game by shooting more threes and making more threes than their opponent. If they do that, they're going to lose. And so to me, defense and rebounding are a big part of it. And two of the reasons why you have to defense and rebound or play defense and rebound is because you want to be able to try to get out and run a little bit against a team that plays really good half-court defense, has length that USC has. You want to be able to make some of those trailer three shots. We've seen, if you have them open. I mean, those might be your best looks. We've seen Joey Hauser make several of those. He's shooting really well. Malik Hall at times has shown that he can make them. In the last couple games, he hasn't. But Joey Hauser's the guy that's done really well with the trailer three. And I think, but to get out and move the ball, to get out and run, or to have a consistent transition game, you have to rebound and you have to play defense, and that's going to be a challenge for Michigan State. You mentioned, Drew Peterson playing on Tiger Campbell, and that's impressive. I would say that Tyson Walker is a little bit quicker than Tiger Campbell. Tiger Campbell's a far better player than I expected him to be in college, but he is a little bit slow as a point guard, but overall, I think the athleticism that USC has is really solid. The other thing I would wonder about, and one of the things that was talked about today in the press conference, was the fact that this would essentially be a 9 a.m. type game for USC. Now, Trojans came out here on Tuesday, flew out early to try to get acclimated, but that's one day earlier. It's different than like we saw a couple of years ago when Rick Pitino was still at Louisville, where I believe that they stayed. Instead of going from their conference tournament back to Louisville and then going to the NCAA tournament, they just flew directly out to a West Coast environment, just to keep their legs. So that's going to be something to watch because Michigan State hasn't played too many noon games, and they haven't been great, I don't think, in noon games. They weren't last week when they played in the Big Ten tournament. Oh, that was a 2:30 game. But this is a whole different animal when you talk about playing a noon game for USC because it is the equivalent of 9 o'clock in the morning, and they're used to playing at 9 o'clock at night.
It's an issue. They were asked about it a few times. The players and the coach that's the reason they came out early. They know that it could be a little bit of a stumbling block, and that's an edge for Michigan State. Michigan State will have more fans here. That'll be an edge too, and they need all the edges that they can get. It's getting back to the defense and rebounding. It's interesting that Michigan State, Izzo's still talking about that. It's been a week. It's been 2 weeks. Everyone knows they need to get that squared away. At some point, you had to wonder maybe they just don't have it in those areas.
I think they do. I really do. I mean, you go back and I see some of the times where they, you look at a Rutgers team when they out-rebound them by 10+, and that was when Rutgers was at full strength and was out-rebounding everybody. They've out-rebounded some really good teams, but for them to do what they need to do on the glass, everyone has to go. It can't just be Joey Hauser. And one guy that I think can really help them is Jaden Akins. When he goes and he gets on the glass, when he aggressively rebounds, he gets a lot of them. He gets a lot of tough rebounds. When Michigan State tries to take off and run before they have the ball secured, that's when they get in trouble. I think one of the things that I'll be looking for in this game is I felt like Michigan State got their legs. Well, obviously they're well rested, but the tandem of Joey Hauser and Mady Sissoko. Can Mady Sissoko occupy a body and Joey Hauser get those rebounds he's been getting throughout the year? Maybe he's kind of dropped off a little bit. The other guy I'll be watching is Malik Hall. He has not gotten a lot of rebounds, and maybe some of that's he's not a good rebounder at the three when he's at the three, but he needs to be able to contribute on the glass, and it's got to be a group effort.
Why is he not a good rebounder at the three? That doesn't make sense. It seems like he should be able to excel as a three. Rebounding.
I would think so. You would think so, but
that's where he'd have a height advantage.
But you would think so, but he doesn't. And I don't know if it's an instinct thing. I don't know if guys are waiting around. I've seen a couple instances where I feel like guys are just late reacting to it.
And he's had good reboundings at certain points in his career.
But I'm just saying he has. But in these past in the past month, there has been very few games where he's had 5+ rebounds. And for a guy that size, with his athleticism, and his ability to move on the floor, for him to have games where he has 1 or 2 or 3 rebounds, that's not enough. And someone's got to be able to do that. And Jaden Akins is a guy that can do it. I think AJ Hogarth can rebound a little bit, but they need Hauser and Sissoko to work in tandem. One of those guys doesn't have to get 10 rebounds, but one of those guys has to occupy bodies.
Yeah, they could use a rebounding edge. That's for sure. USC is a pretty good rebounding team. Michigan State, if they can resurrect some of the rebounding high points that they had earlier in the year, it needs to happen right now. And Michigan State comes in with that reputation in the past of being a physical rebounding team. So one of the things that Andy Enfield and USC is driving home to their players is, hey, it's the Big Ten. They think they're physical. We got to match their physicality. Quote from Drew Peterson today, quote, "We know they're going to be physical with us, and we'll be prepared," unquote. He's not saying it like he's bravado and stuff, but that's something they're talking about. It's a Big Ten, they'll be physical. We got to at least match their intensity and exceed it. So Michigan State is not a physical team, but when teams come expecting to land the first punch, it becomes problematic for Michigan State. I thought that was a problem for Michigan State in their game at Bloomington against Indiana. Remember when was it Mitchell Kopp? Is that his name? When he knocked down Sissoko. Was Kopp the guy that knocked down Sissoko and kind of flexed
Kopp's
about
dirty.
it? He came out, there was a lot of jawing going on. Indiana was coming out to make a statement against the reputed Michigan State program. Even though this is not a physical Michigan State vintage this year, Indiana was of that mindset. USC will be of that mindset as well, trying to prove something. On the flip side of that, USC, just trying to glean things from some of the quotes, they say that Michigan State runs a little bit like Arizona did. Enfield says, traditional Michigan State, they look to push the ball. But when they look on film, they're not going to see a Michigan State team that has pushed the ball yet. And Michigan State will try to now that they're out of the Big Ten. I don't know if we'll see any great improvement there for Michigan State, but it's a possibility.
I mean, we've seen bits and pieces in everyone during the last month. I mean, this is a continuous thing. A lot of times we say this for the month or whatever coming up to the postseason play. Big Ten teams sell out to stop Michigan State's break. That's what they do. A lot of times we see for Michigan State this season, we've seen for 10-minute stretches at the beginning of the game, where Michigan State's done a really good job for a half, maybe sometimes to close out a half in 10 minutes. They haven't had a consistent, great transition attack for an entire game, and I don't think they will in this game either, and I think some of that's by design. When Michigan State's gotten up by a good margin, Tom Izzo has kind of called guys off a little bit, but I do think that against a team like this, they're going to want to try to run, and I know it's something that Michigan State's wanted to do, but one of the other things we talked about in the car ride over is I think it's different this year than the traditional Michigan State fast break. You knew who was going to get the ball, you knew where it was going, and I don't think the Michigan State transition system works when you've got different guys bringing the ball up the floor, different guys triggering it, and
bounding it.
And it's not the same. I think it creates a hesitation, where it's not what I would consider muscle memory. Like in a traditional Michigan State break, everybody knows what their rules are. You got your big running at the rim. You got all wings are sprinting. It's all set. So you don't really have to think. You just react. And I think there's a little split second thinking. And sometimes guys are bringing it up, and it's a little different.
Specifically when Malik Hall's out there, he could be running the wing as a 3, or he could be inbounding as a 4. And if it's a small lineup and he's out there with Hauser, he's running the 5.
Right.
And sometimes you'll see when the other team scores, he hesitates for a second, and that's too late. So they've had 11 practice days in the last 12. They've had one game in 12 days. I assume they've worked on that a little bit. We'll see if there's any improvement in that area. Now, as far as some of the quotes today, Tyson Walker said, "I feel like you come here to Michigan State to go to a Final Four," unquote. He's feeling the moment. He's going to want to do what he can to try to put his team on the back a little bit if that's what it calls for. Hogard said he's just trying to soak up even that moment up there at the podium. These guys, last year helped them a little bit. USC's been to the tournament 3 straight years. These are seasoned teams in a lot of ways, and I think it's going to be an excellent game between two well-coached teams, both of which have had some injuries, both of which trying to get full traction, both of which are dangerous, and maybe neither of which has played their perfect game yet this year. Maybe USC did with a victory over UCLA, but USC 2 years ago was in the Elite Eight. Drew Peterson was on that team as a sophomore, playing 34 minutes. He's expecting to go far in this tournament as well, and he's a difficult cover. And it's going to be tough, just like the last time we were here, Paul, back in 2012.
Yeah, and I think one of the things with Drew Peterson is, he's a guy that leads them in rebounding, but you don't want him to get up to where he's having 15 rebounds or something like that.
Right.
And the other thing is you don't want him to the point where he's making shots but also creating for others, which he does a really nice job of. He's the kind of guy that, everyone looks at the guards and says, this guard could go off and he could dominate, and you got to stop this guy. And Boogie Ellis is a guy that we all know that can fill it up. The guy that scares me is a guy that Drew Peterson, because he can do it in a lot of different ways. His ability to rebound, his ability to create for others, and his ability to create shots for himself. I mean, that to me is the true danger, for Michigan State in this one. And you look at a guy like Tyson Walker, we've seen so many times this year where when he has been aggressive with his shot and he has taken shots that, where there's no hesitation and he goes up and shoots it. I think that's when he's at his best. He wants to be a good teammate. He wants a great shot selection, but against good defenses, and we've seen him do this against Purdue at times. We've seen him do it against a lot of teams. You just have to be able to shoot. You have to be ready to shoot, and you have to pull the trigger without having a conscience. He's not going to take bad shots. That's not the kind of guy he is. Last time Michigan State played against Ohio State, I felt like at times the ball was getting to him a tick late, but I also felt there was a small hesitation where he wasn't being the overly aggressive guy. He was looking to make the extra pass, and sometimes he did, but the guy in the corner getting the ball would be someone that maybe you don't want shooting it. Tyson Walker has to have one of those tournament-type moments, a la Travis Trice or Denzel Valentine or Bryn Forbes or all these guys over the years that have risen up. He's got to be able to pull the trigger without a conscience and trust himself that he's making the right play. And there's not going to be big windows. There never is in the NCAA tournament. I think fortunately for Michigan State, they've played in a lot of these type of games where guys have had to make tough shots. But I think Tyson Walker is the guy that has to be able to put the team on his shoulders. Even if he's missing, he has to take tough shots because he's shown over the course of the year that he's not always going to miss.
Sure. And Michigan State's looked at a lot of angles, I'm sure. Michigan State's played in a small lineup sometimes here and there. Now, USC with Joshua Morgan led the Pac-12 in blocked shots, 6'11", quick jumper at 6'11", long. And not only is he a good shot blocker and long, but in their defensive system, he is coiled and looking to help. He's a goalie to move off of his guy and block shots. He'll leave Sissoko alone. Against Arizona, Ballo is the big man. Ballo would go up to the top of the key, and he would leave him up there, and he was down here double teaming the big 6'11" power forward for Arizona, the kid from Lithuania, and they double teamed him and left him all alone. He's a goalie in here, and that's why their 2-point field goal percentage is so good. So, for a guy that's that good defensively, 6'11", veteran, they rarely throw entry passes to him as an offensive option. I haven't seen that at all. If Michigan State goes small, USC is not designed to go take advantage of Malik Hall guarding that guy. Maybe they would, and maybe he'd do okay, but they would be doing it left-handed. They'd be doing something that's not their strength. Meanwhile, on offense, he's got to come out and guard Malik Hall, and that could open up the rim a little bit. Initially you hear about USC and their size, and you wouldn't think about going small. Maybe Michigan State will try it for 2 or 3 minutes to see what it looks like, but I'd be interested to see what that ends up looking like if Michigan State does it. I'm not saying that'll be a game-changing moment, but it's a card somewhere in the deck that they can play, and it might open some things up. I don't know.
And the one disadvantage of going small a lot, because there's been times where Michigan State has kind of relied on that, or it kind of fell into that. I think over time it makes it harder for you to rebound, and you see at times where Joey Hauser is rebounding at a high level early in the game, and he's rebounding really well when Monty's in there as a tag team partner. But when he's playing that small lineup and there's a lot more physicality, and he has to withstand a lot more physicality because he doesn't have a tag team partner in there, that's when he wears down. And
USC will charge to the offensive glass. They'll be aggressive. They're not spectators on the offensive glass.
So that would be my biggest concern. Like that small lineup. Oh yeah, it looks great, but is it going to create diminishing returns? And we've seen this a lot of times. Like you look at one of the constants when you look at Tom Izzo talks about like some of these games where they've been up late and they've lost, and he talks about losing focus. Well, I think some of the stuff is fatigue related, and that's why it can't just be Hauser. Like Sissoko was was pretty dang good against Ohio State, and
He was.
So you got to look at.
He was more active on the glass than he had been.
He was better as a shot blocker. He was more physical. He had more bounce to him. Hauser did as well. But by the end of that game, when Michigan State was going small, they couldn't rebound. And Ohio State's not a great rebounding team, so that would be my concern. The other concern I would have is with the freshman bigs, whether it's Kohler or Carson Cooper, can those guys give you something rebounding coming off the bench? A lot of people think, well, Jackson Kohler coming off the bench, it's great for him to give a couple buckets here or there. Well, he is very inconsistent with that. He might give you 2 or 3 in one game, but what you need from him is to be able to rebound 2 hands, box someone out, and provide some resistance. There's been a lot of times where he's been pushed around a little bit. I don't know if that'll happen against with Morgan out there. He's not super physical. He's more like athletic up and down. But I would worry about Kohler a little bit with a lack of physicality. I think Michigan State needs either him or Cooper to, when they come in, to be able to rebound the ball two-handed. Otherwise, you're not going to get the kind of rest you need from your bigs. And you got to get that to get to the fast break going also. I think Kohler possibly could get some open shots at the free throw line because what's his name, 24, Josh, what's his name? Morgan. He will sag off, like I said. He'll sag off against Sissoko, of course. Will he sag off against Kohler? If so, Kohler might have some 15-footers from the elbow. I'm not sure. Something to keep an eye on. Not something Michigan State has gone to this year, but things happen in March. Also, against the drop coverage ball screen with the way they drop Morgan, ball screen, Tyson Walker, 16-footer, pull up, they've had against Purdue and Michigan at times. That window could be open as well, and you got to make them. And I would also think, this is a game where like a Jaden Akins, we've seen games where he's made a couple of those. We've seen games where he's had some really good looks on some of those pull-up jumpers, and he's been off just by a little bit. This is a game where you need Jaden Akins, Tyson Walker, and A.J. Hoggard to make a fair amount of those if they're available. All right, so last time we were here, Michigan State beat St. Louis in the second round. They played Robert Morris in the first round, and it was a very good St. Louis team coached by Rick Majerus, his best St. Louis team. Majerus was a great coach, and he had carte blanche there with that program, and they had some tough guys, some athletic guys, and they were well coached, and it was a dogfight. Michigan State won by 6 points or something like that, and then got caught on the tarmac because there was tornado warnings. They couldn't get back home on a Sunday night. Didn't get back home till late, and they had to go out. It was a Sunday, Thursday turnaround going out west. Like you said, Louisville was already out there. There's a Draymond Green team that had gone to the Big Ten championship game the week before without Brandon Dawson, who had gotten hurt. So they were thin. They were a man down and playing a lot of games in a little amount of days. And Draymond didn't get his dream to go further than the Sweet 16. But here, one thing I remember, I can't remember who St. Louis played in the first round, but we were right there in the front row watching St. Louis. Was it Memphis? It was Memphis. Was it? Yep. Memphis was soft, man. They clowned those guys. And Majerus. I think it was Memphis. Majerus had his sweatshirt on. It was kind of a sweatshirt sweater, and I remember back when he coached Ball State at the Silverdome 30 years ago. He had sweater like a high school Indiana coach with he just always has that sweater look. You never see him in a tie or whatever. He had his sweater on, and it's a blue sweater or whatever. And he's out there coaching, doing his thing. Then we come back 2 days later, and my man's wearing the same sweater. I mean, Louis Carden-Seca got away with it back in the 80s because it was a thing. It was a superstition. Majerus just grabbed it off the pile, put it back on. That was Majerus. He was great. And that was a good coaching staff, too. Porter Moser was a guy that did a lot of legwork for that team. And really, one of the reasons why that St. Louis team was so good is Porter Moser got a lot of good dudes out of Chicago, tough dudes out of Chicago. And that team, There's not often times where you see a team from what you consider mid-major, beat the crap out of Michigan State, and that was the one time where, both it looked like one of those old school Purdue Michigan State games, in the locker room afterwards. Everyone was beaten and bloodied on both sides, and Rick Majerus that night predicted that Michigan State would win the whole shooting match. And if St. Louis had gotten a different draw, they might have gone further. That was a great coaching matchup between those two, and the way the schedule fell and the injury to Dawson wasn't meant to be that year for Michigan State, but that's what I remember about this place. It's a cool arena. 11 years ago. It's a cool arena. I really like this. It's it's got a smaller feel, but it's a neat place, and what sort of the Blue Jackets play, obviously, but I really, this is one of the arenas that I like.
It's good. So Big Ten country. I know a lot of Michigan State fans will be here. It'll be a noon kickoff. Can I say kickoff?
Yeah, sure.
We're in Columbus, and it remains to be seen. Sometimes we've been at some of these venues. The first game that's played, I know, weekday, it can get.
It's weird.
It might only be half full. We don't know. The game after this is Marquette, so Marquette fans will be filing in. It's a big thing for them. Obviously, it's a big thing for Michigan State, but it could be a deal where it's first game of the day, early tip-off, might not be that loud in here. Both teams might have to be able to create their own energy, and a lot on the line for those 40 minutes of basketball on Friday. We'll see where this team can go. We'll see what Marquette looks like. Marquette looked great last weekend. I thought Arizona looked great last weekend. They didn't win the Pac-12 championship, but in the two earlier games, I thought they were outstanding, and they went out there today against Princeton, and I think Arizona was 4 out of 25 from three-point range. That's one thing. If you're not shooting and you're taking 25 shots, you're only making 4. In the meantime, you better not give up 10 offensive rebounds like they did. They did both. They did both, and they're going home. Right. So it's madness, and we'll see if Michigan State can start writing some new chapters beginning tomorrow. It's going to be difficult, and if USC is on, it's going to be problematic. If both teams play their B-plus game, I don't know who that favors. A lot of times, whether it be football or basketball, if they both play their B-plus game, this team, it's their game to lose. But I don't know how to call that in that regard either, because Boogie Ellis in a B-plus game and Peterson in a B-plus game, they're going to be putting up some points. Bottom line is defense wins in March, and statistically and what we've seen in recent weeks, the mode of operation, the body of work, USC has been the better defensive team. That needs to change tomorrow for Michigan State, or they at least need to be able to match and contend on the defensive side, because USC is going to be playing some really good defense. It would take a great Michigan State offensive effort to have a good shooting day. It's possible. Talked about that with shot, fake, drive, extra pass. That's what Arizona did. Can Michigan State do it? I don't know, but it's difficult around the rim with 24 in there. Anything else?
The other thing that we've seen in this first day of the Big Ten or the NCAA tournament is teams have had big leads, and they've given them up. And I think
West Virginia, Maryland.
In West Virginia, Maryland, you look at like a couple other teams. There's been several of them. Even in that Alabama, Texas A&M, Corpus Christi. In the second half, Corpus Christi came back from like a 30-point deficit and closed to within 13 points. Now Alabama eventually, blew them away, but
Charleston played Missouri? Who'd Charleston play? I don't know, but
Charleston had a deal like that. There's a couple other teams where there were big leads. Illinois was down by a substantial margin. They came back. They lost that game, obviously. But so to me, it's like one of the things that Izzo's been talking about throughout the last couple of weeks is finishing games. And so if Michigan State gets up big early or USC gets up big early, it's not the end for either team. You got to keep on grinding, got to keep on chipping away, and it's the way you finish, and Michigan State will be looking to finish strong. They need to. Obviously, you'd like them to play well from start to finish, but really what I've seen so far in the first day of the tournament is that no lead is really safe, and nor should it be.
And those mid-majors are strong. Michigan State not playing a mid-major today, but mid-majors, everybody said there'd be some mid-major teams that have the older teams that survive their conference tournaments would be dangerous. They're always dangerous, but we may see more of that as this one goes along. As far as USC and Michigan State go, they're both explosive. Michigan State against Nebraska down 9 points, and they just played great in the second half. USC is the same way. If they get on a roll, every college basketball team can get on a roll, but when they beat UCLA, they were down like 9 or 10 and went on a roll and won by 13. They just got hot, and Boogie Ellis can get hot, and it's hard to shut off his water when he gets rolling.
So it comes down to like one of the things that has hurt Michigan State when they've been up big are those moments where bad shot selection, where you have a little scenario where okay, you're up 14, all of a sudden the guy's feeling it. He's hit a couple good open shots and he has a heat check shot. Then on the next possession, turns it over. And then all of a sudden that team, instead of keeping on building that lead or maintaining it, you allow a team to get back into it. Michigan State can't have those type of moments. They can't be like, hey, we're rolling, everything's going good, now it's my turn to get mine, or or my bad type situation, like a careless turnover, missed cutouts, those type of things. Like, I think those are the little things that you got to do this time of year. Otherwise, you're going home. And there's, you look at the Virginia game today. That a turnover. It cost Virginia a chance to, go a long ways in the tournament because I thought their bracket was set up for them. Furman goes and hits a 3 after that turnover. That was the difference in the game. So the little things matter. And there's no more time for my bads.
And they've been preaching that for a couple weeks, right. And they still had it against Ohio State. And Izzo chalks it up to wavering focus.
And it's no different for any other team. And you see that throughout basketball. You watch any conference tournament, and everyone has these lapses. And it seems like those kind of lapses, in my opinion, miscut out at the free throw shooter. Those always end up costing you games.
And Izzo's been working on it, and he's been talking more focus here in the last week and a half or so. And he's wondering just, what he can do to get the guys dialed in, because they need to be dialed in for this one for sure. So it's going to be a tough one, and it should be fun. Michigan State back in at 25 straight years. It's been fun following them over the years. Difficult task if they're fortunate enough to win, and an even more difficult task, presumably in the second round if they get Marquette. We'll see. And if Michigan State gets to the second round, they will have established something in this game that they can build off of. And I would have a little different viewpoint maybe heading into that one, because they will have focused for a game, and Hogard will have run the offense and not taken bad shots, and Akins will have done what he does and do it well, and not have the slippage on his behalf with shot selection. Malik Hall, for a veteran, still looking to see where he fits in. He said as much last week after practice. Sometimes some of his shots haven't really fit into the whole puzzle. So if they win tomorrow, a lot of those puzzle pieces will have been dusted off and applied properly, and that would be a good sign. But that's 40 minutes from now, 40 minutes of basketball from now, and nothing's guaranteed. But Izzo's happy to be here. He's got a lot of energy. He said today, and players also said, Coach has been here before, so we're following his lead. So that's another thing that Izzo has done that he doesn't usually do, doesn't feel he has to do. Usually he wants his players to be leaders because they've had that experience. And some of them have, but Izzo was trying to say, hey, win this game, we'll win this. You win this one, we'll win the second one. The coaches will win that one, is what they're saying. So they're optimistic. We'll see if they can follow through and turn this and put some good footprints into this season for themselves and the Michigan State fans. Anything else, Paul? For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. I've been watching the VCast from Columbus, Ohio, the nationwide arena. First round, East Regional, SpartanMag.com.